Hello, my name is Dexter Garner. I'm a sales engineer here at Fairwinds, and today I'm going to be speaking to you a bit about our FinOps features within Insights. So within Insights, we integrate across the entire software development lifecycle of your Kubernetes environment. So whether you're trying to enforce labeling, enforce setting of CPU memory requests and limits at time of CI, whether you're trying to attribute cost in a showback or chargeback model, or whether you're trying to have developers self-service on right-sizing recommendations. There's some aspect of those within our feature set here at Fairwinds. So I'm going to walk you through pretty much the integration from the beginning with our CI integration. And so I'll come over here, I'll click into repositories. So we hear very frequently that teams are trying to attribute costs. They're trying to enforce labeling so they can understand what cost center a particular workload or deployment is associated with. They also want to ensure that developers are setting proper CPU and memory limits on their deployments. And so you can enforce those things within Insights. Our CI integration acts as a build step within your CI pipeline. And then if those policies are failed, we can stop the PR from being deployed, offer actionable remediation advice, and then hopefully, get that proper Kubernetes object into your cluster. So I have an integration here. This particular example I'm going to be walking through is with GitHub, but we have an open-ended webhook to integrate with any of your Git providers. You can see that I have a file here, this deployment file. There's a couple things that I want to enforce. There's some labels that are missing. I want to have a team label and enforce an owner label on this deployment. I also want to ensure that there's always CPU and memory requests and limits set on our workloads. That's something that you can see on this deployment has not been done. This file has already been deployed, and you can see that we've created action items, which is a finding within our platform. This first one would go back to that FinOps labels that I'm trying to enforce. So you can see I did have an app label on that deployment, but I'm still missing this cost center and team label that I'd like to enforce. Additionally, there were not CPU requests or limits on that workload. So you can see exactly on that deploy.yaml. We give you a description as to why you should set those, why it's important. And then we provide inline remediation advice. So let me come back to this file. I already have the completed deployment here, so bear with me. I'm just going to copy this file over. So now on this deployment, you can see that we have an app, a cost center, and team label all associated with this deployment. We also have proper limits and requests being set on this workload. So hopefully now that we're deploying this, the policies or action items that have failed within our original deployment should be remediated and resolved within the platform. So let me go ahead, pull up my terminal here. And I will push that off to GitHub. And I'm going to come into our repository here. See that I've pushed it to this development branch, and this will be a pretty typical flow. So let's say a developer is working on a feature branch, and then they want to merge that into a target branch. You can see that we have a commit ahead. And create that pull request. Just going to give it a slightly better label here. Cool. So I will confirm, and of course, GitHub will send that off to do its thing. I'm going to just jump back in here into the main branch of my repository. You can see now that we have settings and build being run within our CI pipeline. I could, of course, navigate in here. You can see that Insights is running all its checks within the build output. So we'll give that a minute to complete here. I'm just going to navigate back so we can get a quick window. So obviously, while this is completing, there's a number of different constructs that people use to associate costs back with application teams, with workloads, et cetera. Let's say you're running the same workload across multiple clusters, across multiple application teams. It's a integral workload for your application success, and you want to understand cost of development there. So that's why it's so integral to apply some of these labels. Of course, all these policies can be configured to your liking. You can see here that Insights is now run. There should be no blocking checks. We come back into our repositories, jumping back in. Awesome. So yeah, you can see that we've cleared out those few action items that I pointed out. So we should now have cost attribution on that deployment. Now let me jump into our efficiency tab. We'll talk about right sizing that deployment. So this is going to be kind of the high level overview. I'm just going to go ahead and click on cost for this example's sake. Really what you have here is a great aggregator. You can understand a number of different metadata. For this example, I'm going to just jump into some of our top workloads across our cluster. This default is going to show us workloads operation over the last 30 days. So I'll click into top workloads, and I'll segment it out by our 10 most expensive workloads. Again, demo environment is not going to be super, super expensive. I'm going to click into that individual workload to zero in on it. And then you'll now see this resources per pod chart that pops up. So a couple things to point out here. Within the purple, you can see the minimum usage over those 30 days. There in the orange, you can see the average usage, and then up towards the top, you can see the maximum container usage over those 30 days. Nice thing as well is we provide you recommendations based on a quality of service. So of course, guaranteed. Let's say it's going to be a critical workload to your application's performance. You always want to ensure that it's online, no downtime. So we're going to set our requests and limits the same up towards that 95th percentile of container usage. Alternatively, you could choose burstable, and it's going to set your limits up towards the 95th percentile, and then your requests down towards the mean or average. For this example, you can see down here towards the left, we have current 3,000 millicPUs. Our recommendation based off that 30-day time period would be roughly 2,000. So you can see there's a large difference there proportionally. And so we're going to recommend a change. If I'm a developer or whoever is in charge with setting requests and limits on containers, you come in here, you could simply copy that over, go to your deployment file, redeploy, and off and running you are. Couple other questions we get is, all this is great, but we're running thousands of workloads off of a number of clusters, and it's just not reasonable to expect us to come into a UI every single day. Well, we would agree. We do have some third-party first-class integrations. So let's say you're using a ticketing system like Jira, for example. When you meet a certain threshold based off our recommendation, so obviously here you have about a 30% difference, we can create this ticket or action item to go off to your development board. Let's say a developer logs into Jira, they're working on their daily flow. They would see this ticket come across, and they can jump in and remediate that. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. So navigating over to action items. Action items is where all of our continual runtime monitoring is taking place. We have about 11 clusters here in our demo environment, but I'm going to just jump into a quick action item that has to do with right sizing recommendations. So I'm going to click on Prometheus metrics. Let's say that your requests are too high on this particular container. Coincidentally, this is on the Insights submission container. You can see our remediation advice here. So you could very quickly copy and paste that. This is what this bundling is going to look like as it comes across into Jira. So I'll jump into here. Let me find another example of a right sizing recommendation. So same concept. We want to meet you where you're doing your development work. So we're not breaking your flow. Developer could come in here. They could see the remediation advice. If they wanted to, they could navigate back to the UI, look at that workload over a 30-day period of time and say, yeah, is this something that I agree with? Is this something that I want to adopt and deploy into our environment? So tons going on. Again, if you have any additional questions, we are always happy to help. Feel free to contact us here at Fairwinds. Thanks so much.